My name's Angelo, and welcome to We Want Picks. This is the only channel dedicated to UFC fight picks and DraftKings lineups run by MMA insiders and professional fighters. Every week, I join Dan Kramer and Nick Newell, two longtime professional fighters that have fought at the highest levels on the planet, as well as Jacob Lyons, a skinny kid from Indiana. So join us every single week for our full fight card breakdowns, our individual fight card breakdowns, our betting guide, and our DraftKings lineups. We are back. We had a week off, and now we're back with UFC on ABC2, and the first fight on the entire 15-fight card is Impa Kasanganay versus Sasha Palatnikov.
Welcome back, baby.
Palatnikov.
Until he's been practicing.
Palatnikov.
Yeah, 2
Impa
weeks.
Kasanganay versus Sasha Palatnikov. So this is an interesting one to me. These odds are nuts, and I know we say that a lot, but these odds are very far apart. It's an interesting fight. You may know Impa for being on the wrong side of probably the greatest UFC highlight of all time. So it is interesting. He has made a lot of changes since then. On the wrong side of a wild knockout finish, he has dropped weight. He's a massive human being. He's now down at welterweight. He's completely changed his gym. He's changed everything about his career after that, essentially. And he's trying to rebuild himself, understandably so, right? That was a bad – he actually looked good in that fight until that knockout. But he's trying to work his way back, switching things up. Nick, I'm going to go right to you. What are your thoughts on this fight? And what are your thoughts on – that was kind of a crazy knockout that'll literally never, ever happen again. What are your thoughts on him just changing everything about his entire career after that?
I mean, if that's what you need, I don't think like one loss makes you need to change everything. But if he felt like his preparation wasn't right and it was in the back of his head, then it was the right move. I think he's going to win this fight. We've talked exclusively about him, but he looked really, really good in his fight versus Maki Pitolo. He controlled that fight. He looked great. Even Maki looked good in that fight, but Impa was start to finish kind of in control of that fight, in my opinion. Palatnikov, his last fight, he basically did the Homer Simpson technique. Koshki beat him from post to post the first round and wore himself out. He survived and just showed incredible heart in that fight. That's something that not a lot of people have, and he showed that he is all heart. And he has some good skills too, but I think that Impa is just a little bit faster than him. And, I honestly think that these lines make sense to me. I think that he should be a huge favorite, and that's why I'm putting him in my lineup.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I thought the lines were farther apart than they should be. And I guess I'm factoring in too much of what going to welterweight will do to Impa. I mean, he was a good size middleweight. And so this is a lot of weight to cut. I mean, I just don't know what he's going to look like, what his gas is going to be. And Sasha has proven that he's got gas and he's got guts and he will not break. So, Dan, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, do you think that weight cut's going to be tough? You cut to welterweight and you're a pretty big dude. So, I mean, what are your thoughts?
I was miserable cutting to welterweight. I don't know. I feel like this day and age, if you decide to make that cut, I don't know that guys are doing 30 pound, 25 pound water weight cuts anymore. If they are, I don't know. It's not the smartest thing. But my guess is that if he thinks he can make it, he can make it. So he'll be a big boy at 170. That's for sure. But yeah, as far as the fight breakdown, I did watch some tape on Kasanganay. I think he's definitely the better striker, the more athletic guy. Nick said it. He looked great against Pitolo. The interesting thing is I was watching his fights, and he has some explosive power in his hands, but he has 0 wins by knockout. I was like, how could he have not knocked anybody out? He's got 6 decisions and 2 subs. He definitely showed he has a good chin. He took some good shots from Buckley early before getting hit with the super kick from hell. He looked pretty good. He got taken down once. He got back up. Overall, he's just a very good striker, fast, hands, power. We'll see. Hasn't had a knockout yet, but I think Sasha Palatnikov, I think is going to be outmatched in this fight. Nick said it well. He did the Homer Simpson's last fight. Like, he got destroyed that first round. And then he looked great after that, but it's really easy to look good against a guy who's dead tired. So I will say he's tough. He's got a chin, and he definitely has cardio. So if the weight cut does affect Kasanganay, that's going to be a problem later in the fight. But I just think overall Kasanganay is a better striker. I think he does potentially have some takedowns in his back pocket. Palatnikov has been taken down in multiple fights, and the 2 fights he lost, he's been finished on the ground. So I'm picking Kasanganay. I'm putting him in my lineup. I think he's $9,500, so he's expensive. So I'm trying to work him in right now, but I think he's going to win this fight. And I think, honestly, this might end up being his first knockout win.
Yeah, it's definitely so. You guys definitely aren't putting as much weight into all the changes he's made as I am, and that's fine. So, Jacob, what are your thoughts here? What do you think? How do you think this goes? And is either one of them going in your lineup?
First of all, he's going to look fantastic at 170. I've been cruising on his Instagram a little bit, and he's going to get there, and he's going to look great doing it. But the thing that impressed me the most with Impa about that loss is sometimes your first loss, I feel like, can really make or break you as a fighter. And if you watch the way he talks about that fight on his Instagram, he has pictures of himself getting knocked out, with a caption. I think he's really embraced that loss because it wasn't like a freak loss. Like you saw Sean O'Malley he was talking about, like, I'm undefeated, and that works for him. It wasn't really a free. It was a wild knockout, but I think he was losing that fight anyway. So I think he realized in that fight, not just because of the knockout, that he had to change some things and he wasn't comfortable with some things, but I think he's the better fighter in this fight. I think he's a very good fighter. I don't think he's a great fighter, that being Impa. And Sasha kind of reminds me of the old boxing poster you always see of the guy with the mustache that just kind of stands like this. Yeah, I feel like he kind of fights like that, and he's like that tough type of fighter, like just kind of hands low, and he's willing to brawl. So he definitely got some power. He might be able to catch Impa, but like Dan says, I think Impa's just a little bit quicker, a little bit faster, a little bit more powerful. So I have him winning this fight, but he's not in my lineup.
Go ahead, Nick.
One more. Okay. So I don't think the cut to 170 will really be a big deal for Impa also, because the 2 people he fought previously in the UFC have both fought at 170 before. So he might have looked big in comparison to them, but Maki Pitolo has fought at 170, and so has Joaquin Buckley. So comparing him to 2 middleweights that have made welterweight, I don't think is a fair comparison. And I don't think he looked like bigger than them either. So I think that 170 won't be that big of a deal.
It's also tough to tell when you have that body type where you're like pure muscle. Sometimes you just naturally look bigger than you actually are. And there's a lot of water and all that muscle. So sometimes it makes it easier to cut a little bit of weight, a little bit more weight. You look deceivingly big when you're that ripped, so it may not be as bad of a cut as it looks.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I think we're all right. Meaning, I think Impa's the better fighter. I think he's more explosive. I think he has more tools. He may be gun shy after the knockout, but if he is, I think he'll lean on some grappling. And Sasha has decent kickboxing, has a decent ground game, but it's actually the transitions where he struggles a bit. So I think Impa has a few ways to win this fight, and I think he does win this fight. I will be watching these weigh-ins very closely, though. If it looks like it was a struggle, I may stay away from this at all costs. Next up at UFC on ABC2, we have the rebooked 3 times William Knight versus Un Jun. So William Knight was supposed to fight Alonzo Menafield 2 different times in the last few months. He finally is out of his sort of COVID quarantine, and he now has Un Jun in a took 2 weeks to rebook this fight type matchup. Un Jun has probably the best jab in the division, and William Knight probably has the best cardio for a guy that size. This is a very interesting fight. He was a slight favorite / even against Alonzo Menafield, and he is now the slight underdog against Un Jun. So, Dan, what are your thoughts here? I'll go to you next, Nick, after Dan. I know you're very high on William, so let's get Dan, who picked against William Knight last time. What are your thoughts here?
I don't know. I don't think I can do it again this time. I think this is going to be a tough one to call. Originally looking at it, I thought Un Jun was going to win this fight. and then I started watching some tape. So Un Jun hasn't lost since 2016. He's 2-0-1 in the UFC. He's got some wins over Mike Rodriguez, Ibramigov, and then he's got a split draw against Sam Alvey, who's deceptively good and actually looked really good in that fight. He's a very good boxer, fast combos with power. He got clipped a couple times with Alvey's left, and he was having a hard time dealing with Alvey's kind of counter style striking. So I think he's a very good boxer, but he also has some potential holes there. The big factor in this fight, I think, is going to be, from what I saw with William Knight, is he's explosive as can be. He's jacked. He goes for takedowns, and when he gets on top, he has vicious ground and pound. And the takedowns are the biggest thing for me. He doesn't look like a great technical wrestler, but he's so strong. He finds ways to, like, big brother trip people and body lock them down, and just he figures out a way to get it to the ground. And in a couple of Jung's fights, he got taken down pretty easily. He did not look like he was there from a wrestling defense standpoint. So I think that could be a big factor in this fight. So it really depends how William Knight, approaches this fight in his game plan. Because I think if he tries to strike, he could land a big shot, but I think he'll get outboxed by Jung. But if he goes for wrestling the whole time and he's got the cardio that Nick talks about and just finds ways to be explosive and get it to the ground, I think he's going to win this fight and probably get on top and smash Jung a bit. So close one, but I'm going with William Knight, maybe by TKO in the second or third. I'm not putting him in my DraftKings lineup because I'm not too sure on it, but I think I got to pick Knight this time.
Well, and if you've seen our other William Knight breakdowns with the two Alonzo Menafield fights, we know that Nick knows him personally. Nick knows how phenomenal his cardio is. So, Nick, why don't you break down how you think this goes? I imagine you're going to pick William Knight, but do you think the cardio is the differentiator here, or is it just the actual, fight matchup?
The guy loves working out. Like, he will do like insane workouts the day before his fight. I think one time he was like bench pressing the day before weigh-ins, and I saw him at weigh-ins. I was like, dude, what are you doing bench pressing yesterday? He's like, that's my normal routine. He's like, I do that when I train, so why wouldn't I do it before a fight? I was like, hey man, do you? And then he actually beat Yorgan to Castro. That was the same day, same fight card as an amateur. So he's good. He's very good. I think technically boxing, Un Jun is a superior boxer. He has good diversity. He mixes in uppercuts well, and his striking is very good. But I feel like they're going to end up in a clinch. So they're going to be striking. They're going to get close. The way William throws, the way he throws, they're going to end up in a clinch situation. Will's going to make it dirty and just kind of wear him out throughout the rounds, finish him in the third, if not go to a decision. So I'm going with William Knight in this fight, and I don't have him in my lineup right now, but it could be a possibility because I'm just trying to think about how many points he's going to score. I do believe that he will win though.
Yeah, especially at $7,800. $7,800 is a nice number. Under that under $8,000 mark is, you start to hit some value, especially if not only do you think you'll win, but you think there'll probably be a stoppage sort of later in the fight. So I think Daung has some phenomenal, like his jab is phenomenal. His striking overall isn't phenomenal, but he does use his jab really well to keep distance. So I think William will be sort of competing with that. But Dan, and I'll go to you in a second, Jacob, but Dan, you mentioned Sam Alvey's sort of sneaky good. And you're probably right. I see that draw versus Sam Alvey, and I'm like, you got a draw with Sam Alvey? Like, if Sam Alvey,
dude, watch that fight. Sam Alvey is very good. He fought that fight.
Disrespect, man.
And he is good. It's just like it's.
I would never talk about a fighter like that. No
it's
way.
Such a bizarre, like sloppy style. And the way I took that is if Sam Alvey cracked him a few times and sort of rung his bell, I can't imagine what William Knight would do if he sort of made the same connection, but with his power and his speed. I don't see Un Jun winning this. He certainly can if he just jab, jab, jab and stays away and just be an incredibly boring fight. But I just think Nick is very high on Williams' cardio. And if that cardio is there, he can continue to push forward and can make it happen. Where we saw Daung completely gas out. He has cardio issues. And if you looked at this graphic and you said who has cardio issues, you would not pick Daung, but he is the one who sort of has had cardio issues in the past. So Jacob, what are your thoughts here? I know you've become a giant William Knight fan. So what are your thoughts here and how do you think this goes?
Still looks good as ever. Still looks good as ever. This picture, I think the other ones he was on the left side. So now we see the other side of him. Now we've seen the whole package, and I gotta say. So yeah, I think actually Nick nailed his analysis on what William Knight needs to do in this fight. He needs to use a clinch, and he needs to make this dirty, and he needs to use his athleticism. I have in my notes, needs to make it dirty, use his balance, which is athleticism, in the clinch. Because if you watch Jung, he does, when you're watching him, he doesn't look like a 13-2 fighter. He's kind of stiff. He's a very good boxer, but he doesn't look like a pure athlete until he hits you. And then when he hits people, that's when you realize that's why he's 13-2. So he's got power. William Knight's got to be careful. But I think that the athleticism of William Knight is just too much for Jung. He can get in, he can make it dirty, get the fight to the ground if he needs to. And I think he wins this fight.
Yeah.
Nick, a question for Nick. Does he wrestle a good amount? Does he have any good wrestling training partners?
So in wrestling in Connecticut, he beat the guy that won state opens at double L's, but then didn't wrestle at state opens his senior year.
So for anybody not from Connecticut, essentially what he's saying is when he competed at wrestling in high school, he beat the number one kid in the entire state who won the singular best kid in the state, won that state championship, even though he himself didn't compete in that championship.
Yeah, I don't know why. Or maybe he did and he got injured, but he didn't he wasn't in the top 6, but he did beat the number one guy pretty convincingly. So he was a good high school wrestler. Okay.
So he's got, I mean, the Jung fight against Ibramigov, dude, he got taken down so easily. I mean, he ended up winning the fight, I think, but or was that the draw? No, he won that fight, but it was to the third round, he got dragged down and ragdolled. So if Knight's in shape and has any sort of wrestling skills, I think he should be able to do that to Jung.
Honestly, William Knight's not in my. Oh no, he is. I'm looking at my lineup now. He is in my lineup. Good. Glad I did that. If he wasn't, I was about to add him in based off of this conversation. But he is in my lineup. Either way,
here we go with Angelo.
It's in my lineup.
All right, that we all can see as you're changing it.
I'm looking at here. It has all the good picks. Right. So anyway, this will be a fun fight. We're looking forward to William Knight finally getting in there. We've tried to get him on the show, Nick. That's your job. But we'll wait till after his fight.
It's fight week.
Wait till after his fight. Anyway, this will be a fun one, and we're looking forward to it. Next up at UFC on ABC2, we have Luis Saldana versus Jordan Griffin in what is a pretty close matchup. Luis Saldana, interestingly enough, all 14 wins are by stoppage. Knockout, submission, doesn't matter. Every single win he has is by stoppage. Jacob, how do you see this fight going? What do you think happens here?
That's a great call out, Angelo. I am trying to verify right now, and I can verify. That's very good research by you. I can also say his Sherdog lists him as 0 feet, 0 inches tall, which is short, slightly taller than me. This is his UFC debut, but he comes from a camp with, and you'll hear him talk about it in his interviews with Henry Cejudo and Patricia Pitbull. And he says those guys are in there wrestling with him all the time. He's a fantastic striker, but he'll use his grappling. And that's what scares me in this fight. I think Luis Saldana wins the fight, but Jordan Griffin, if you get him on the ground, he's going to find a way to submit you. He's 1-3 in the UFC. He's a little sloppy. He will come forward and throw some wild stuff, but he's a little sloppy in the way he does it. Well, Saldana is more precise striker. But the fact that Luis will use his grappling kind of scares me for Luis. I understand he can do it. He can control the positions, but Jordan Griffin, I think that's his only way to victory in this fight. So I have Saldana winning this fight. He didn't make it in my lineup, but that was a great stat that you brought up. So maybe I'll just go over here and do the Angelo and change my lineup real quick. But yeah, right now he's not in my lineup, but I have him winning the fight.
Well, and what's interesting about Jordan Griffin, and I'll go to you in a second, Nick, is you mentioned he's 1-3 in the UFC, and that's probably anybody who's done some research and pulls up Tapology, that probably jumps out at them and is like, oh, that's a problem. But he has fought every single killer that isn't famous. If you go through his record, every single person he fought is a tough, gritty veteran, whether he won or lost that fight. And they're just not big names, but they're all killers.
Especially Chaz Skelly.
So Jordan,
former lock of the week.
Former lock of the week. So Jordan Griffin is just, I think he definitely has more experience. He is a little more one-dimensional, but I think that experience might be a problem here. So I personally think Luis Saldana wins and it's because he has more ways to win. He's more well-rounded, but it is his UFC debut, and he is fighting somebody who has fought every single person sort of in that division, both in and out of the UFC. I think that could end up being a problem. So this to me is razor thin. But Nick, what are your thoughts on this fight?
I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to go with Jordan Griffin in this fight. I think that he's a friend of mine. So that kind of is influencing, but really, honestly, I'll be honest about fights. And even if someone's a friend of mine, it's my job to give real insight on this fight. And I just think that he might get put in some tough situations. He might get beat up, but he's going to find a way to win. Saldana's lost before to lesser competition, guys with not so good records and has fallen apart and got finished in those fights. So I feel like Jordan Griffin, if anyone, is the guy to, even if he's losing the fight, find that opening. The reason why I'm not putting him in my lineup is because exactly that. If Jordan wins, he'd probably get beat up a little bit and then come back and find a way to win and not really score a lot of points. And I don't trust Saldana enough to think that he can do it. I think that Jordan Griffin's going to find a way to win. So that's why he's in my lineup. I mean, that's why he's not in my lineup, but I do think Jordan Griffin's going to win.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so you're basically saying between the experience and just the grittiness, he will figure it out. And then I guess if you combine that with the fact that it's Luis's UFC debut, I'm sure there's some jitters there, especially it's an odd time on a major network. This is sort of a big event, even though it's not a pay-per-view. So Dan, what are your thoughts here? How do you think it goes? They have similar records, but one is truly a vet here.
Yeah, I think this is a tough one to call because I think Saldana has more skills. I think he's the better striker. And I think he could piece him up on the feet, but Griffin, I would say, is a gamer. Like you said, he's got the experience and he's tough. He's a grinder. So this is one of those fights where I think it's going to be tough for Saldana to put him away, and Griffin's going to keep coming forward, throwing bombs, make it an ugly fight. And, if Saldana's not ready to go 3 rounds and maintain that technique and have the cardio to do it, Griffin could wear on him and surprise him later. So with that being said, I do have to go with kind of the up and coming guy, the more skilled guy who's Saldana. So he's my pick, but it'll be a close one. I think Griffin's got what it takes to make it a very close, grindy type of fight.
Yeah, it'll be a fun one for sure. So we'll see what happens. If it ends up grappling heavy, I think Jordan Griffin wins it. If it's more of an MMA fight, I think Luis Saldana can pull it off, but we'll see what happens. Yeah,
that's another thing too. That's a good point, Angelo, because it's a big question mark on his wrestling defense. Like I haven't seen a whole lot out there. So if Griffin comes out with a wrestling game plan.
Oh, he trains with Henry Cejudo, I just said.
Yeah, but
what does that mean?
Dan trained with,
right.
That means
with
they transfer the powers to each other
potato.
in camp.
Hey, you know what, Jacob, that is a fair point. You would think he should be training wrestling defense. So, but we will see.
They wrestle all the time. They transfer powers. I see it in movies all the time.
They crush streams in the urinal. So anyway, it'll be a fun one, and we'll see what happens. Next up at UFC on ABC2, we have Hunter Azure versus Jack Shore. Jack Shore is one of the slickest, most hyped grapplers in this division right now. And Hunter Azure is just a gritty, old school wrestler. I love this. I'm like really looking forward to this fight, honestly. So I'm going to go right to you, Nick. You're a wrestler and you're a grappler. What are your thoughts here? How do you see this going?
This is the biggest question mark fight of the night. I think that Jack Shore is the more dynamic, diverse striker, but really it always comes down to his wrestling. So he ends a lot of the combos with shots. He shoots often. He shoots early. And I just don't think he has the wrestling to really beat Hunter Azure, who's very, very good wrestler. You look at Azure getting knocked out by Kelleher, and things happen in fights. That was not to say it wouldn't happen again or anything like that, but that was a bad style matchup. He didn't want to shoot on him because he was afraid of getting caught in a guillotine, and Kelleher was just game and caught him. So I think that's one of the reasons why he's such a big underdog, especially with Jack Shore being undefeated. But I'm actually going to go with Hunter Azure in this fight. I'm picking a lot of underdogs for this card, but I think that Hunter Azure wins this fight. I think it's by decision, and I don't think it's dominant. So I think his wrestling will be the difference maker, but there'll be a lot of scrambles, a lot of pushing against the wall, Jack Shore getting up, stuff like that. So I'm gonna pick Azure. I think it will be close, and I'm not putting my lineup.
Yeah, I completely agree with literally everything you just said. I'm also going with Hunter Azure. I think the wrestling is the difference here. So Jack Shore is a phenomenal grappler, especially in MMA. He's shown it, he uses it, and he's just so tricky. But Hunter Azure is such a good wrestler with such good control. He can dictate what he wants to do. And yes, there will be scrambles, and I'm just hoping those high hip wrestlers, he'll win those scrambles and he'll avoid getting caught in something. You, Nick, specifically are a wrestler, and you have more first round submissions than anybody I can think of, and you catch people in scrambles. So I'm hoping that's not what happens to Hunter Azure, but I do think Hunter Azure gets it done. This is a razor thin fight. I think the wrestling beats the grappling. But Dan, I'll go to you. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, this is one that when I was watching it too, I was like, man, I don't know. Like, Hunter Azure, I'm like watching tape and I'm like, he's going to negate the wrestling of Shore. I think I'm like, that's going to be a wash. So then it goes to the striking, and they're both pretty good strikers too. A lot of people I was reading were saying that Shore is significantly better striking. Like from the tape I watched, I didn't really see that. I will say Shore, to your point, Angelo, probably has the edge with catching a submission. He's definitely trickier in terms of submissions and in the scrambles and things like that. So I think this is going to be like a dead even fight other than that one area. So I guess I'll give the slight edge to Shore, but I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised seeing Azure going the other way. And honestly, for $7,500, he's probably a value in DraftKings. But to Nick's point, I don't know how many points he's going to score. So this is a tough one to call. My pick, I'm going to go with Shore. But from a betting standpoint, I don't know that I would go with him. And from a DraftKings standpoint, I definitely am not going with him. So I'm going to try to do a little bit more research during the week, because the fights I saw, I'm like, this is dead even in the wrestling, the striking, and then the only big difference will be if Shore can catch a submission.
Yeah, and you mentioned Hunter Azure. You and Nick both mentioned Hunter Azure. If he wins, it'll be the wrestling. It'll hold him down, avoid the submissions, and win a decision. And in DraftKings, wrestlers do fairly well because they score 5 points for a takedown, and then they get control time. With that being said, Jack Shore will, if he gets taken down, he's going to be working for position and sweeps and things like that. He's not going to be working to stand back up. Yeah. So if he was working to stand back up to his feet, you may get another 5 points out of Hunter if he gets another takedown. In this case, I think when Hunter takes down Jack Shore will say, okay, I'm on the ground. I don't want to be on my back. Let me work for a sweep. Let me create a scramble, but he's not going to get back up to his feet. So you're not going to get those repeat takedown points. So I sort of agree with that analysis where Hunter's probably not going to score a ton of points because you're not going to get the 5 for a takedown, the 5 for a takedown, the 5 for a takedown over and over. But Jacob, what are your thoughts here? How do you see this going? You going with the edge in the wrestling or the edge in the grappling?
Yeah, you guys nailed it. Jack Shore, I think, should win this fight. I think Jack Shore is the better fighter overall. But when I look at these two guys, I'm the same thing you guys do. I see Hunter and I'm like, man, can he wrestle? He's a great wrestler. And this is the difference I see between the two of them. Jack Shore grapples to submit and Hunter grapples to, destroy you. The ground and pound, it's elbows. So if there's a weird scramble, when Jack Shore's in position, he's just trying to be, nice and technical, trying to submit you. And Hunter, if he gets on top, it's gonna be bad news for Jack Shore. So I think Jack Shore should win this. He's 13-0. He was 12-0 as an amateur as well. So that's like 47-0 or something like that. And but I'm going with Hunter in this. I just think just because he's just nastier. I honestly think that it just comes down to just being a nastier grappler that he's going to end up on top and TKO him with some elbows.
Yeah, it'll be a fun one. I'm honestly looking for. There's actually a good amount of.
And I hope that they wrestle, because a lot of times you get this matchup and it's just they just stand and stare at each other. They try and strike. They're both scared of each other's wrestling and grappling. So I hope that they get down to the ground.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Slugfest. Sometimes when the wrestling cancels out, they end up just bombing on it.
And Hunter's got the power advantage on that aspect. I think so. If they start striking.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I genuinely am looking forward to this fight of all the fights on the card. This is one of the top 3 that I'm looking forward to. Next up at UFC on ABC2, we have one of the weirdest matchups in the history of the heavyweight division. I'm going to try to be as polite as possible here. This guy, Jarjis Danho, has not fought in like 5 years. And Yorgan de Castro, while he has fought within the last 5 years, not great. So he's got a ton of power. He's super athletic, but it's just such a weird matchup. This is one of the weirdest matchups I've seen. So what I will say is in my lens, the way I'm looking at this fight, I have to assume that Jarjis is in shape, ready to go. And although it's been an incredibly long, I think he's had a longer layoff than he has actually had a fighting career. I think he fought for like 3 years, took 5 years off, and now he's back. So it's crazy, but I'm going to assume he's ready to go. He's in shape. And if that's the case, these odds are wild. And I actually think, Jarjis has a decent shot at winning this fight. If I assume he comes back the same way he was before he left, I think he can win this fight. I think at $6,800, he's a great value, but 5 years is a ridiculously long time. And Dan, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this fight, I literally wrote in big letters, who knows? And the guy's 37. He hasn't fought in 5 years, like you said. He has no wins since 2015. So it's a long time to not have one in the cage and all of a sudden be in the UFC. But I will say, Jacob, if you didn't catch this already, this is going to influence your pick. His nickname is Man Mountain, not Mountain Man. It's Man Mountain, according to SureDog. So
Man Mountain, look at that.
Look at that. Switching it up just to make it a little bit more interesting.
Woo!
So I thought that was kind of cool.
Woo!
So, I'm going to dig into
some. Feel even better.
The other thing I'll say is he's definitely going to be well rested for this fight. So think about it. He's fought 3 years. He's taken off 5 years. He's going to be fresh. So now, all kidding aside, I am going to do some research this week because I don't know, anybody who takes 4.5 years off and decides to fight, you don't just do that unless you really, in my mind at least, like if I were to decide to fight again, I would have to get myself maximum motivation. I would take maybe a year, 9 months to start training, get back in the rhythm. So I'm like, if he thinks like me, like that's what I would be doing. So I want to find out where he's been training, what he's been doing. So I'm going to do a little bit. Actually, Jacob, you can help me with that.
Sounds like Dan's coming back. I think he was trying to allude that Dan's coming back, baby.
Doing this show, like,
comment down below if you want Dan to come back. Comment down below.
I can tell you right now, doing this show, like Dan speaks differently and stuff now. There's like some weird.
He's coming back, baby.
He's
getting the itch.
Competitive, especially you're back at the gym training.
The people's champ in the corner. I'll be in your corner.
It's not just for
the get the itch, but unfortunately, the only fights I get in these days are for the remote control, and I usually lose that. So, yeah,
we'll do Bachelorette breakdowns for you next week. But Nick, you're familiar with Yorgan de Castro. He's a Northeast guy. You're a Northeast guy.
I didn't even get to talk about Yorgan de Castro. Jesus Christ. You start talking about my comeback.
I didn't.
And
okay.
Nick, anyways.
Go ahead.
Right
Give
over you.
11 more minutes. Go
I
ahead.
was just about to make an announcement. No. No. Danho, who knows? Man Mountain, though. Cool nickname. Yorgan de Castro lost his last two, but he looks like he's a pretty solid boxer. I mean, heavyweights are weird. Sometimes they stand there and they don't want to strike. Next fight they go out, they knock the guy out in the first round. Then sometimes they hug each other in the cage for 15 minutes. Like, you just never know what you're going to get. So this fight, I feel like the UFC, if they're going to give anybody like, hey, we want you to win. You lost your last two. We don't want to cut you. Let's give you a 37-year-old guy who hasn't fought in 5 years. So the pick is de Castro just based on age and activity. But there's too many unknowns about everything in this fight. So I'm not touching it for DraftKings.
Yeah, it's definitely. I completely agree with all that, except my pick is actually Jarjis because he does have the wrestling. I think the takedowns are the differentiator in this fight. Yorgan de Castro is a pretty versatile striker. I mean, he's got solid power. Yep. He uses his kicks. He's an athletic dude, but he has been tentative in the past, gun shy in the past. I get all choked up just talking about it. He's had been gun shy in the past, and I think Jarjis, 5 years is wild, but I just, I have to assume he's ready to go, and I think if he uses that wrestling, I think he'll get it done. So Nick, you know him, you've seen him fight, you've somewhat followed his career just by the nature of being in the Northeast. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah.
What
I'm just kidding.
Yep. What?
I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. So, Yorgan de Castro, he trains with Team Regiment in Massachusetts, which is a really good up-and-coming team. And they have a lot of young prospects, and the guys that have gone there have they've had a few guys that kind of turn around their careers and have found some great success. So he's got a really good team behind him, even though it's not like a big camp or a big name team. He's gotten really good there, and he has the skills. I mean, his Contender Series fight, I'll be honest with you, I thought he was in some trouble because he was fighting a Greco alternate. So a guy that was on the Olympic ladder for Greco-Roman wrestling, which is different, which isn't like double legs or anything, all upper body stuff. And, but still, if you can wrestle Greco and you're on the Olympic ladder, you probably know how to do freestyle too. You probably have done it, or at least did folk style. So he was able to stop the takedowns, get on his feet, and knock him out with leg kicks. Then his second fight, he fought Tafa, who's a beast, and he caught Tafa running forward with a hook and planted him on his face. He fought Greg Hardy, and he was winning the first round and beating him up, and I was like, oh, Yorgan's gonna win this one. And then he decided to just like stop fighting. He like hurt his foot or something, and he didn't want to fight. Like, he just was worried and is in the back of his mind, and he lost that fight. And then he didn't really show up his last fight either. Jarjis just kind of runs forward like a maniac. Maybe 5 years off makes a big difference, but I see him getting caught just like Tafa and getting face planted. But it all depends on what de Castro shows up. So if he shows up and decides he wants to fight, he's knocking Jarjis out. If he shows up and decides that he's just going to stare at him, Jarjis is going to outwork him, grind him, make it dirty, beat him up. So I think this all really comes down to which de Castro shows up, and I'm not in the mood to deal with that shit. So I'm not putting him in my lineup.
Yeah, it's definitely tricky. I don't know if any of us are touching this fight in their lineups. Jacob, what are your thoughts?
That was a bad word. I don't know if you're going to edit that out.
If we can't monetize this video, Nick, that's your fault.
Unreal.
What? You can't swear?
No, you can't. I'm just.
What did he even say? I didn't even hear her swear.
It was the bad one.
Oh, deal with that.
So bad.
SHIT.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I agree with. I think on Angelo, surprisingly, on this fight. I think that Danho, I don't know if he will win, but he definitely can win. I saw that long layoff and I thought, oh, I'll put de Castro on my lineup for sure. I mean, this guy hasn't fought in 5 years, but then you watch him fight and his wrestling is very, very good. And I just don't see Yorgan de Castro, defending those shots. I still think, it's the 5 years is so tough, man. You just don't know what's going to happen. And Yorgan's got heavyweight power, but he doesn't have like wild power. So that could help Danho out. But I'm kind of in Dan's camp just because I picked the Castro. He's not my lineup. It's just simply because of the 5 years layoff. I don't know what Danho's going to show up. I think if he does show up and uses wrestling, he can actually dominate this fight.
Jacob, we got to do some research this week. Find out what Danho's been doing. That'll be the edge. If he's been out there training with Khabib every day or something.
No, he trains. If you look at his Instagram, he trains at just like a team with like a small team. It's in whatever country he's from. I'm not familiar with whatever country he's from, so it's in a different language. Some European country.
I did find something about that, but
look who's talking Instagrams now.
What's Instagram?
Yeah. So either way, this is definitely one of the more bizarre fights on the night, but we'll see what happens. It's still heavyweights. They may bang, and we'll see what happens. Next up at UFC on ABC2, we have John Makdessi versus Ignacio Bahamondes. And this is an interesting one. I have personal beef with John Makdessi. If you have been watching UFC for a very long time, you'll remember the sponsor, Fear the Fighter. It was a clothing company back in the day. And John Makdessi and his brother, I think it was his brother, started that company. I managed a couple of UFC fighters at the time, got a Fear the Fighter sponsorship, and we never got paid. And there's a legitimate controversy about that. And he says he wasn't involved in the business, and it was a whole big thing. So I will never pick him to win. But
shame.
With that being said,
this
is an interesting matchup. He has taken John Makdessi's been off for a while. He's had a pretty bad injury. He hasn't fought in a while. He's coming back against a very young, up-and-coming, looking good lately Ignacio. So I think it's a pretty easy pick for me, especially with my bad blood and the money owed. But what are your thoughts?
John. Come on, John.
Nick, what are your thoughts on this fight?
I mean, this guy he made his UFC debut in 2010. So he's been in the UFC for over a decade. If you got beef with him, I got beef with him. You know what I'm saying? Because we ride together.
Bad boys for life, baby.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Sneeze gang. So if you look through his line and who he's fought like the who's who of, well, not the who's who, but he's fought a lot of tough competition. Wins over Dern Cruikshank in a striking affair, Sam Stout, Shane Campbell, very good striker, Mehdi Baghdad, very accomplished striker, Abel Trujillo, more of a wrestler, but also has knockouts, Ross Pearson, and he's looked good in a lot of those fights. His problem is he's like all legs, so he's like short, he has like short arms, and but he moves in and out really well. The one thing that concerns me about this fight is that Bahamondes is an animal. So he's got really diverse striking, good spinning attacks. I think his dad was his coach, so he's been training since he was born. And Makdessi has a problem backing up. When he fought Trujillo kind of put him on his back foot and made him work, but I mean, not Trujillo, I'm sorry, Trinaldo. Trinaldo put him on his back foot and really had him backing up the whole time. That was a good fight. And Trinaldo is like one of the most underrated guys in MMA, in my opinion. When he fought Lando Venata, he was backing up like that. And Venata just said, you know what, I'm going to throw this spin kick. And you leave yourself susceptible to crazy attacks like that. And Bahamondes is the type of guy to do something like that. But I think that Makdessi, sorry, Angelo, has better composure and better boxing and better hands. And if he can keep Ignacio moving backwards, he'll win this fight. So I'm going to pick him to win this fight, but I'm not putting him in my lineup because I'm not so confident that he's not going to get caught with some of that crazy stuff if he decides to show up and fight off his back foot.
2 seconds ago, we ride together, we die together. If you got beef with him, I got beef
win the
with him.
fight.
I'm picking John Makdessi to win this fight.
Angelo, let me just say that John, that disgusts me. I am disgusted, and that makes me sick to hear that story. And John, you're taking everything Angelo's working for. I want to fight your.
Why would you? I gotta edit that out.
So the Nate Diaz, I couldn't resist.
You can put a bleep over.
Yeah,
it.
I would just bleep it. Just
bleep
bleep
over
it. We'll just roll with it.
I'll adding,
Bleep it.
adding work.
Just
Jacob,
bleep
you got to
it.
go next now after that one. After you call them out.
Just go ahead.
Oh, yeah,
Edit
so-
your whole segment.
Yeah,
out.
we're gonna leave this in. But that just
bleep it.
makes me sick. But so honestly, when I watch John fight, he's a very good fighter. He's not a great fighter. You don't see that great fighter in him. He's very good. He's very technical. He's very good. I said very good twice. I realized that. But Ignacio, I think to me, when I watch him fight, and these graphics make it look a little bit weird. John is 5'8". Ignacio is, I think, 6'1", and he's got long legs, and he's
6'3".
He's 6'3".
He's huge.
Yeah. So he's got those long legs, and he knows how to use them. He uses his distance well. And the fighter that he reminds me of the most with this in and out, those long legs, is Gustafsson. I think he fights a lot like Gustafsson, very, very in and out, using his length. So I think he gets the job done. He's only 23, which is kind of crazy. I think John is 35 now. So John, you got to just be better, man. You got to be better.
It'll be an interesting fight. It honestly will be. So John Makdessi is very good. He's been around for a very long time. He's fought some really good people. If he was a wrestler or has ever taken down anybody, I would actually lean towards him. 6'3", like that's a lot of leg to shoot in on, but he's not a wrestler. He's a striker only. I don't think he's ever had a successful takedown in the UFC. And Ignacio being 6'3", yeah, so Dan held that up. Ignacio being 6'3", I don't care how good of a striker you are. That's a giant, like that's a big distance gap, and he has to really bob and weave and Mike Tyson his way in, and that's not who he is. So it'll be interesting. I have Ignacio in my lineup. I have him to win. Dan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I don't have either of these guys in my lineup right now, but I am leaning towards Ignacio. I may work him in. The problem is with Makdessi, we all talk about it. He's been in the UFC. He's got experience. He's fought tough guys. And I just always get nervous against those guys who are veterans that have been in the game, have the composure against kind of the up-and-coming guys who are very good. But, I mean, we've seen it lately where a lot of guys show up in their debut against a guy who's a veteran or a journeyman that's supposed to lose, and they get in trouble. So that has me a little apprehensive. But I think overall, yeah, Ignacio's the pick here. I think he's going to be bigger. I think he's going to be, I don't want to say a better striker, but just his style is going to be more aggressive. And I think Makdessi kind of, I don't want to say the ship has sailed. He's 35, but yeah, I think Ignacio is going to be the hungrier, younger, up and coming guy, and go out there and get the win.
I did the same. I did my lineup, and then I tried to work in Ignacio because I was like, man, I really like this matchup for him. So I couldn't work him into my lineup. If there's a drop, I'll look for him to be in mine. But yeah, I agree. He's right there.
That's what it is too. The matchup too. The matchup is a bad matchup for Makdessi from what I'm seeing on tape. And to Angelo's point, 0 takedowns. Like if he doesn't have that in his back pocket, like it's an even worse matchup for him. So,
Dude, 0. Like he has like probably 12 UFC fights, not one.
Right, he's a kickboxer. He's not even like a brawler. He's a technical kickboxer. And when you have basically one skill set to train for, there's a lot of different ways you can get ready for that. So I think Ignacio should be ready for this one.
Yeah, it honestly will be a fun fight because I agree with the young up-and-comer versus tried and true vet. And if you watch this show, we normally pick the vet, and we're normally right. So it'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to the matchup for sure. And $8,900, I love that price. I just love that he's not 9,000 or more. So we'll see what happens. Another fun one. Next up at UFC on ABC2, we have Norma Viana. You may have seen her last. What do you say?
Dumont Viana,
right?
Yeah,
no.
Dumont Viana.
Jacob does the graphics
On UFC, she
Jacob
just said Norma.
He was thinking about Polyana Viana, and he just
on UFC website, she's listed as Norma Dumont Viana.
So I quality control this before we air now because Jacob has a very long history of spelling errors and
He's
and
right.
odds mistakes.
He's right. I looked it up.
He is right. And he got mad at me when I questioned it this morning. So
I don't get mad. I get even.
you may see her as Norma Dumont, especially in DraftKings, but it's Norma Dumont Viana on the UFC website. So we have Norma Dumont Viana versus Erin Blanchfield. And this is an interesting one. We have a solid grappler against a solid grappler. So we have two grapplers. One has some better striking. It's an interesting matchup for sure. Jacob's shaking his head. He butchered the graphics. I'll let you go ahead and make your pick first.
I wouldn't shake my head. I was doing, I was just reacting to what you were saying. You say it so well. I was dancing in my seat.
Very articulate. Go ahead.
Yeah. So this is grappler versus grappler. I think that Erin in this matchup, she can get a submission, but I think she's going to really struggle with Norma's strength. Norma is just very, 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 very strong in the clinch. And I think Erin's not going to be able to get in those positions that she wants to get into to get a submission win. With that said, Norma in her fight against, Megan Anderson, her last loss against Megan Anderson was, or Megan, I think is what she goes by. She looked tired in that fight, and that fight only lasted, 3/4 of the first round. So, she came out of a clinch situation where she couldn't get Megan to the ground because Megan, 6'1", she just couldn't drag her to the ground. And she came out with her hands low, and caught one and got knocked out. So do I think Erin has that ability? No, but I think she has cardio issues. So if Erin can just kind of withstand the clinching early and get to the ground, I think late you could see a submission win for Erin. So I think Norma wins this fight. She's not in my lineup, but don't be surprised if Erin catches her later in the fight.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure because Norma's a very good grappler with some decent striking and she's got power, but she doesn't have great takedowns and she's missed weight. So this is weight-wise, this is really interesting because Norma is huge for the weight class and missed weight in her last fight. Erin Blanchfield is coming up in weight. So already by coming up, there's a discrepancy there. But now coming up to compete against probably the biggest person in the weight class who hasn't made the weight is an even bigger gap. So it's definitely
the strength. You're just repeating what I said.
Okay. Anyway, it's definitely an interesting move. And I think she will sort of pay that price and sort of feel that size and I don't think it's going to go well for Erin Blanchfield. Jacob, you missed all of those points, but I'll go to you, Dan. What are your thoughts on this? How do you see it going?
I actually think Jacob did a good job there. I think Norma Dumont.
Why you guys always
That is
surprised? Every
shocking.
single week,
That
you guys are
is
always
shocking.
surprised.
No,
Every single fight, I bring the best analysis, and every time you guys are like, "Oh, I can't believe that! Wow, look at this, unreal."
Jeez, what a way to take a compliment. I give him a compliment and he gets all defensive about it. No, I think Norma Dumont, has to be the pick here. But I will say later round, she could get into trouble. Blanchfield trains at Renzo Gracie gym, I believe. So she's going to be prepared. So for the price, I would never spend $9,300 on Norma Dumont and DraftKings. Like that's kind of number one. And I mean, $6,900 for Blanchfield. I don't know. I don't see her scoring a lot of points, but for $6,900, sometimes these fights that the odds are -240 plus 200. I don't know if that fight's going to look like that. A lot of these fights sometimes turn into much closer than you think. So I'm not touching this fight. If I did, I would take Blanchfield for the $6,900 in DraftKings, but I think there's other cheap fighters that will definitely score more points. So not touching it for DraftKings. I think Norma Dumont should win the fight, though. That's my pick.
Nick, what are your thoughts on this? How do you see it going? I mean, for the most part, all three of us are going Norma. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So if you look at Blanchfield's record, it's actually pretty good. She has a knockout win over Victoria Leonardo, who fights in the UFC, and a win over Kay Hansen, who fights in the UFC. And her loss is a split decision to Tracy Cortez, who's like a fringe top 15 fighter, and Tracy Cortez has a lot of hype around her. And Tracy kept taking her down, and Blanchfield was throwing her in submission after submission after submission and had her in some real trouble. So, she's good. And I think she's only 21 years old. So she's still growing into herself. I think when she fought Tracy Cortez, she was like 19 years old. So that's not even like a grown up, like composed woman. She still has like a long career ahead of her, and she's an absolute animal on the ground with knockout wins. But with that said, I thought Norma Viana or Norma Dumont, Viana, whatever. I mean, against Megan Anderson looked so much smaller, and Megan was just super powerful, trying to take her down and wrestle her. And it was just, it was a tough matchup especially when you're fighting someone that long and big. She moved down and she fought Ashley Evans Smith, who's a wrestler, and was getting the takedowns in that fight. And her in and out striking looks really good and really solid in that fight. And she had Ashley in some real trouble. So I am picking Norma Dumont Viana in this fight. Right now I have her in my lineup, but I do have some things I kind of want to move around. So I might take her out. She's lowest on the totem pole, but I think her in and out striking, it will be a high volume striking contest with Blanchfield going for some takedowns, but not really getting them, and then Norma landing the strikes.
Yeah, it'll definitely be an interesting matchup. I didn't realize that Blanchfield was as young as you said. So maybe we're not picking her this fight, but I imagine we'll be picking her, over the course of the next year or two.
Yeah, she's got a long career. She's an amazing fighter. And her jiu-jitsu is good.
Yeah, and I think I completely agree with you. I think the size is going to be the problem, because in order to use that jiu-jitsu, you have to get it to the ground. Right. And I just don't see her doing that.
You would agree the strength. Okay.
Next up at UFC on ABC2, we have Scott Hot Sauce Holtzman versus Mateusz Gamrot. Nick, I'm going to let you go first. You were on a collision course with Scott Holtzman for a while there. You were the XFC champion, the undefeated at the time, undefeated in the XFC. And Scott Holtzman was also barreling through the XFC, but then we left to go elsewhere. What are your thoughts here? Who do you think wins this fight?
Yeah, I mean, I usually don't root for Scott Holtzman, and I probably won't, because I left XFC to go get literally 4 times as much money in WSOF because I wanted to move out of my mom's house and actually move on with my career. So he acted kind of like a douchebag, so I didn't really appreciate that. I mean, I guess time heals all wounds, but he is a good fighter. I mean, when you look at Gamrot, you have someone that was good enough grappler to qualify for Abu Dhabi and was undefeated at 17-1 with some pretty solid wins mixed in there. I think Gamrot's good all around. His last fight, he did have trouble getting it down and keeping it there. And I think that he will run into the same problems again. I mean, Holtzman's kind of old. He's like almost 38 years old. So he's up there. And but he's fought some really good guys and won a lot of those fights. The loss versus Nick Lentz was a wrestler, so that kind of has given me like maybe Gamrot will win this. But he's had some really good fights, especially with Josh Emmett, wins over Jim Miller. He got knocked out cold by Beneil Dariush, but he got kind of caught with a trap there. I don't think Gamrot has that striking the same as Dariush. I think he's a very good fighter, but I think he's going to have trouble getting it to the ground, and Holtzman's going to win this fight with dirty boxing, and I actually do have him in my lineup.
Oh, so you're going Scott Holtzman. Wow.
Yeah.
I did not see that coming. So I think, obviously we mentioned Gamrot's grappling is phenomenal. He's a legitimately good grappler on the world level. He was the double champ in KSW in that promotion. He was the 45-pound champ and the 55-pound champ. So he's fought some solid people. He's got an unbelievable record. It is a tricky fight to pick for sure, especially because Scott Holtzman just moves forward and tries to force things. And I don't know how that will work with Gamrot style. but it's definitely an interesting one. So Dan, I mean, what are your thoughts here? How do you see this going?
Yeah, no. So first of all, Gamrot trains down at ATT. So I know, I've heard from guys down there, he is a workhorse. So he's putting his time in the gym. He's getting better. I mean, he was already great, but he's still working hard every day. But I'll start with Holtzman because, when I first saw the matchup, I was like, this is going to be an easy fight for Gamrot. And when I watched Holtzman, I was like, man, this guy's a good striker. He's got good head movement. He does leave his chin up a little bit, but boxing wise, he's got great counter shots, a nice counter right hand, just very, very crisp striking. And even in his last fight against Dariush, early in the fight, his takedown defense looked good. Like Dariush struggled to get him down. So I was like, oh shit, this is like looking to be a tough matchup. He ended up getting cracked with the spinning elbow, but that's against Dariush, who's unbelievable. So, and then he also fought Jim Miller, won a unanimous decision. He looked really good in that fight. He got some takedowns, top control. He was winning all the striking exchanges, had 3-round cardio. So, I was impressed with what I saw on tape from Holtzman. And then looking at Gamrot, so, he lost his UFC debut after being 17-0. But in watching that fight, I think that spoke, first of all, a lot of people say he won that fight. It was very close. He definitely won the third. The second was super tight. I think he got dropped with like the first punch of the round. So that probably just made it impossible for him to come back and win that round. But anyways, he lost a split there that a lot of people thought he might have won. But what I will say is he is an aggressive grappler. So he struggled to get takedowns against Kutaladze. Oh, that's what I was going to say. I was more impressed with how good Kutaladze was than disappointed with Gamrot in the loss. Kutaladze looked good. He trains with Khamzat Chimaev. So, the guy's getting good looks at wrestling and is prepared to defend takedowns. And even being so, with Gamrot struggling to get them early, by the third round, he got, I think, 3 or 4 takedowns in that round. So he's relentless with the takedowns. He doesn't stop. He can do it for 3 rounds. And I think that'll be the difference. I think early on in this fight, he's going to have a tough time taking Holtzman down. And he probably could even get hit with some big shots early on. But I think eventually he gets the takedown and wears on him. And once he starts getting him, he's going to take over the fight. I could see him winning by a finish in the second or third via submission. He's got great leg locks. But I just think the relentless wrestling is going to be the game changer in this fight. And I think he's going to dominate definitely in the later rounds against Holtzman and could get a finish. So I'm taking Gamrot. I'm putting him in my lineup. And yeah, he's my pick.
Yeah, I have him in my lineup as well. So I agree with all of that. I think the grappling will be the differentiator. I'm hoping he doesn't wait till rounds 2 and 3 to make it happen, but I do think that'll be the difference there. So Jacob, you shook your head. What are your thoughts?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So initially I was kind of on the same page as a couple of you. I watched Holtzman and I thought, man, he's very, very good. And then I saw the nickname. You took my nickname, the hot sauce. I'm like, this is going to be the lock of the week. I was like, so when I break down lock of the week, I have it in my mind, this guy or girl could be the lock of the week. Let me go through the process, that lock of the week, very rigorous process of breaking it down step by step. So I started thinking, how can he lose? And Scott Holtzman can lose to grapplers. He's got good takedown defense. I thought he did fine versus Lentz. Lentz took him down, but he got back to his feet. I thought he did okay. But that seems to be the weakest part of his great game because he's a very good striker. He's a very good fighter, but it seems like he can get taken down. And Gamrot's takedowns, the timing of his takedowns when I watch his takedowns are incredible. And the fact that he doesn't even need to like run the pipe and run people against the cage and then try to work for a takedown. He is so quick with his takedown and timings. He is grabbing ankles and just taking people down in the middle of the octagon. That's how quick he is. So I think that Holtzman, his takedown defense is good when it's against the cage and he can really set up that takedown defense. But in the open mat, I think Gamrot's grabbing ankles and controlling this fight. So originally Scott was going to be the lock of the week, and I flipped all the way to the other side, and Gamrot is in my lineup, and I think he wins the fight.
Yeah, wow, what amazing insight into how you pick the lock of the week. so sure of it that
I thought you
did
were
a
going to go
complete
through like
180.
the process, like, all right, underdog, check. Cool nickname, check.
The people know the process.
I think that's it, right? That's where
That
it
is
is.
literally
he needs to check their physique.
Yeah.
Okay, all right,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Instagram, then it's
Abs
Twitter.
check. Yeah.
And it's
Anyway,
LinkedIn.
this will be an interesting one. All except Nick going with Gamrot, and Nick is the one with the beef. So very interesting pick. We'll see how this one goes.
I hope I'm wrong.
Next up at UFC on ABC2, we have Jim Miller versus Joe Sodiq. Don't let the graphic fool you. Jacob does the graphics. He's an absolute disaster of a human being. Can't type well, can't read well. His picks are actually decent. Anyway, this is an interesting fight. It's essentially the movie Gemini. I don't know if you've seen Gemini with Will Smith, where he fights a younger version of himself. That's exactly what we have here. I feel like Joe Sodiq is a younger version of Jim Miller. I have Joe Sodiq winning this fight by exactly how I would have Jim Miller beating an older version of himself. But I'll go to you, Nick. What are your thoughts here? How do you see this going?
This is an interesting fight. Joe Sodiq just finds a way to get it done. I've watched his fights. I thought first Austin Hubbard would be a tough matchup, and he couldn't get the takedown really on Austin Hubbard, but just kind of like shot and then took his back and climbed up his back and choked him out. And Austin Hubbard has fought like world-class grapplers and went the distance and looked pretty good in those fights. And Joe Sodiq just made it look easy. Jim Miller is just an all-around gamer, though. If you look back at some of his performances, he's fallen flat. But then you look at things like when he fought Dustin Poirier and he actually calf kicked him. Poirier couldn't even walk after that fight. He got out grappled and taken down. And the same thing kind of happened. He got out wrestled his last fight versus Vince Pichel. And he's tricky off his back. His striking is really good. He's got good boxing and good low kicks. It's not the most dynamic thing I've ever seen in my life. I think it might be a step ahead of Sodiq in striking, but I think that, Sodiq could make it easier and make it kind of move around, take it to the ground and make it a grappling heavy affair. And I'm very impressed by him on the ground. He's not the most powerful wrestler, but he's more of a slick type guy. I'm going to pick Joe Sodiq to win, but right now I do have Jim Miller in my lineup because I do believe there's a possibility he could win. And I feel like even in a loss, he's going to score some good points. So right now I have him in my lineup. I might move him around, and Dumont is kind of like something I'm kind of figuring out and kind of playing with a little bit. But right now I have Miller in my lineup because if I had $100 to bet, I would bet on Jim Miller.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I was all aboard the Jim Miller train in his last matchup. He was matched up a few months ago when we first started doing this. And I was all about Jim Miller. If I don't even remember who the opponent was, I think it was
Vince Pichel.
No, it was a fight that was
Roosevelt
canceled.
Roberts.
It was a fight that was canceled. And I was all about it. It was versus
Bobby Green.
Yes. I had Jim Miller over Bobby Green. I love that for Jim Miller. I was all about it. I don't think Jim Miller wins this fight, though. I think Joe Sodiq. Sorry, I just read the nonsense Jacob types. I have Joe Sodiq winning this fight. I think he Jim Miller's Jim Miller. I think he out grapples him. He out positions him. And I actually have him in my DraftKings lineup. 9,100 is a lot, especially against Jim Miller. I don't have the records in front of me, but he's got like a ridiculous number of records in the UFC at this weight class. So it's tough to pick against him, but I just think it's almost a compliment to him that I'm picking against him because I think Joe Sodiq is just a younger version of Jim Miller. But Dan, we're not even going to give Jacob an option here. He just ruined this for all of us. Dan, what are your thoughts?
He did pick a really good first name, though. I mean, if there's any name you're going to throw in there that
you're on my mind, dude.
Nobody will be
upset. You've gotten 12-0 the last 2 weeks. I'm thinking,
Right. I mean, you can't blame him, Angelo. I mean, who goes 12-0? Of course he's thinking, Daniel, how do I do this? How do I do what he did? No, I mean, you guys nailed most of it. I mean, I will say Sodiq in his last fight, his boxing looked pretty crisp. I mean, obviously the wrestling is the story here, but his boxing looked like it was solid, and it looks, I mean, at his age, I think he's 27. He's probably improving every fight. He submitted Hubbard like it was nothing. That was almost too easy to where you don't learn that much about the guy. And then Wyman, who's been around forever. And I mean, he walked through him. He was smashing him, took him down, good ground and pound. So he's looked great his last 2 fights. I will say Jim Miller is a crafty veteran. He's good everywhere. He's a tough matchup. And he's 37, but like he still hangs tough. I just think matchup wise, this is a bad one for him. But with that being said, he's so crafty that he could pull off a guillotine or find a sub somehow. So I don't think I'm going to touch this in DraftKings. Salecky is definitely the pick. And honestly, if I were to touch it in DraftKings, I like what Nick said. He's like, I think Salecky is going to win, but I might take Miller in DraftKings. Like this is one of those examples where Miller can probably hang tough enough to score some decent points, even in a loss at $7,100. Sometimes that's what you got to do. Unless you're me, I just go undefeated every week. So that's probably why I'm not going to pick him.
Well, this is going to be a tough week to go undefeated with 15 fights and 30 fighters to pick from. This will be a tough one. And we'll see.
I look at it as easier. There's just more wins for me to get. I mean, if we had more than 6 fighters to pick, I would, I'd probably be 8 now if there were 8.
Love the confidence. I love the confidence.
We'll see what happens. Next up at UFC.
I didn't even get it go. You really not going to let me go?
Oh, go back, Angelo. Let him go. Jesus.
I forgot. I honestly forgot. You're so insignificant to me.
That's some good analysis on this too.
Right. Come on.
Go ahead.
Let's hear about Miller's nickname or
Daniel. So this is the big analysis here that you guys are missing, and why Joe is in.
Yeah, let us know what we missed.
Jacob does come through with some good facts. You can't hate on him there.
I'm being serious about this.
Okay.
Being dead serious. So Joe just became a father, and he talks about how becoming a father has really balanced his training, that he has kind of the yin and yang of his life. It kind of balances his entire life. He also talked about there's a lot of these younger guys, when they meet the veteran, it's like, oh, I'm going to finish him in the first. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. He says, you know what? I'm punching in. I'm ready for 15 minutes. If I get a sub, if whatever happens, that's great. But I'm punching in ready for 15 minutes. This is why Joe made it in my lineup. Jim Miller is tough. And I thought, you're not going to finish Jim Miller. I think he's got 15 losses, 10 are decisions. You're not going to finish Jim Miller. But of the 5 losses he has, 3 of them are submissions. And they were the pretty good submission guys. Charles Oliveira, Michael Chiesa, and Nate Diaz. And Salecky, maybe he's not quite on that level, but I think he is. I think he's a nasty grappler. I think he uses grappling. And if Jim Miller is going to lose, it's going to be, a submission loss. He's shown that in his career. So I think that's why Joe made it in my lineup. I think he wins. I think he wins by submission.
Yeah. So Jacob going with Daniel, and we'll see what happens. Next up at UFC on ABC2, we have Mike Perry versus Daniel Rodriguez. And this is another one that I'm very, very excited for. And it's such a tricky one to pick because Mike Perry is one of the craziest, most bizarre human beings you will ever meet or experience or watch fight. This is super tricky, especially with Mike Perry in the underdog role against somebody who's not necessarily, he's more technical than Mike for sure, but he's not like this technical killer that'll just piece Mike apart, at least not in my opinion. But what are your thoughts, Nick? How do you see this one going?
I'm not touching this fight. I'm going to start off with that. I mean, really, you look at this fight, every time I look at Mike Perry, it's like such a hit or miss fighter, man. He's just a roller coaster of emotions, and he's just a wild ass dude. I picked him to beat Mickey Gall, and I was right about that fight. But some of these fights, man, you don't know if he's going to show up or not. I thought he was going to get destroyed by Vicente Luque. I was like, oh, he's going to kill Mike Perry. And then he pushed Vicente Luque to the limit, broke his nose. It was a split decision. Some people thought he was going to win. I thought Paul Felder was going to whoop his ass, and he really took it to Paul Felder. I thought he was going to lose versus Alex Oliveira, and he really moves forward and looked great in that fight. I thought he was going to win versus Cowboy. So it's really like he's just so hit or miss. Like I don't even want to touch him. And then you see all the crazy shit he does outside the cage. And he's always switching teams and moving and doing all this stuff. And you have Daniel Rodriguez, who has a win over Tim Means, who just beat Mike Perry. But that doesn't mean anything in MMA. MMA math is crazy. And Daniel Rodriguez kind of like looked a little flat his last fight. He he got outpointed, and I don't think Mike Perry's going to be the guy that kind of outpoint him. Daniel Rodriguez has gotten dropped before pretty significantly, fought back and knocked out Dwight Joseph, I believe, in kind of a crazy fight. So there's just so many variables. I'm not going to touch this fight. I'm going to pick Daniel Rodriguez because I think he's just probably been training harder.
Yeah, I think variables is the perfect way to describe this fight. There are just too many, and they're all on Mike Perry's side. We've seen him look like a great grappler. We've seen him look like a great striker. I don't know if we've seen him be a great grappler and a great striker in the exact same fight, but we've also seen him let his nose just completely explode on itself, and he continues to move forward and continue to fight. He's so tricky. He's got power. He's got explosiveness. He's at MMA Masters. I think this is the longest tenure he's had at any camp. So he might have actually gotten a full camp in with a fight camp and actually has some real corners with him. There's
MMA Masters, great team too. One of the most underrated teams.
Well, MMA Masters, yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah. So it's just so tricky when you have Mike Perry because you really don't know what you're getting. I mean, what was it like 2 months ago, Jacob, that Mike Perry like kicked through a window and it was all in his Instagram story and we were debating if it was real or fake. Like the guy's a disaster. He's a straight up disaster. With that being said, I'm going to pick him in this fight. I just am. I think he has all the tools and he's been in MMA Masters for a little while now. Dan, you're at ATT and ATT and MMA Masters have like some like half rivalry, half like camaraderie thing going on. And we've seen those people a lot here and there. And they've taken fighters like Mike Perry with like troubled personal lives and turned them into genuine fighters and contenders. And I think that's what's going to happen here. And I have Mike Perry winning this fight, but damn, is it tricky? And I don't know if I would touch it because there's so many crazy things going on. But Dan, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, a lot more of what you guys said. Like, it depends what Mike Perry shows up, right? Like 2 years ago, this fight would have been like, oh man, Mike Perry is going to smoke this guy. He's going to overwhelm him. He's going to get in his face. He's going to beat him up. But, lately you never know what you're going to get. I agree with you though, Angelo. I think the big change here is that he's at MMA Masters now. Hopefully he's consistently training at a consistent camp. I think Colby Covington's there now. They've got a pretty good room full of guys, but so I'm kind of hoping and anticipating a prepared Mike Perry is going to show up. And if that's the case, $7,400 for him from a DraftKings standpoint, that's a no-brainer because he's tough enough where he's probably not going to get finished. I mean, Rodriguez is a very good striker. He could catch him, but I think at a minimum, this is going to be a 3-round war where Perry's getting hit and coming back with counter shots and just, it's going to be a scrap. So I think there's a lot of value on the $7,400. As far as the pick goes, I mean, I think I'm going to go with Perry too. Just again, hoping that he's training and back to his true form. If that's the case, I think this is a winnable fight for him. And I would argue that if he wasn't so all over the place, he would be the favorite in this fight. So definitely taking him for DraftKings, slight edge to him winning the fight. But again, like you said, variables and uncertainty are the key things here.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I know we keep talking about Mike Perry more than Daniel Rodriguez, but Daniel Rodriguez, he is a very technical striker, and Mike Perry has had some problems with technical strikers in the past. Just hoping that's been cleaned up. But Jacob, what are your thoughts? You're a Mike Perry fan. How do you see this going?
Yeah, I think you guys are discrediting Mike Perry a little bit because I don't think there's ever a time where he doesn't show up. I think Mike Perry always shows up for all his fights. He's always in his fight, always in the fights. He's always pressing forward. He's always tough in there. So I don't think there's fights where he doesn't show up. I think most of his losses are just to better people. I think he just runs into people that are a little bit better mixed martial artists than him, whether that's because he has weird training or weird camps, or that might be why, but I think he loses, to good people. Jeff Neal, Vincent Luque, Donald Cerrone, Tim Means. Those are good mixed martial artists. With that said, in this fight, I think he's the better mixed martial artist in this fight as an overall fighter. Mike Perry is. So I think he wins this fight. The thing that I wanted to make him my lock of the week so bad. I wanted Mike Perry to be my lock of the week. The thing that worried me the most was Daniel has extreme power, not a lot of speed, but a lot of power. And I saw an interview. He's up at Donald Cerrone's place training. So that's where he's at training right now, has been for this camp with Donald Cerrone up there at their lodge and stuff. So that's what kind of swayed it for me to keep it away from the lock of the week. But I think Mike Perry wins this fight.
You know what, Jacob? You made a really good point, because you're right. It's not that Mike Perry has not really showed up. I mean, though I will say the Tim Means fight, going into that, Tim Means is tough, but he's older, and I think he had a long layoff. Like, he was supposed to win that fight based on the level of opponents he'd faced prior to that. But you're right. It's almost like because of all the stuff going on outside of the cage, you think he's not showing up. Yeah. But he's been in there. Jeff Neal, the Vicente Luque, a split decision. It's kind of like how everyone thinks, what's his name? Sam Alvey is a sloppy fighter just because of the way he looks when he's actually a really skilled fighter. Yeah. So
he's definitely, Mike Perry's
perception is everything, right?
Yeah. Mike Perry is definitely one of those guys that I wish was because he's got all the talent. He's got as much talent as anyone. I think without a camp, without corners, he's doing this by himself basically sometimes. So he's one of those fighters I wish could just buckle down and just, his whole career, because I think he could have been really, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And just a quick Daniel Rodriguez thing. I heard somewhere, I have no idea if it's true. I couldn't verify it myself. I heard somewhere that he posted to his Instagram story that like a bong, just smoking weed, and like the bong he was smoking from. And this was just the other day. He's at Donald Cerrone's camp. There are some wild men up there. It's perfectly legal. He's not breaking the law. The laws have changed in Vegas for fighters, so there's no rule breaking here. But it just tells you how serious he's taking it.
Yeah, a point to that. There was in his interview at the ranch, he said that Cerrone was telling him that he's training too hard, like leading up to the camp the week to. He's like, "You got to back down, man. You're training too hard. You're training too hard." So, there's one aspect of that, but it sounds like he's working hard up there. So,
yeah.
Wait, can you smoke weed now and then fight? It's not.
They lowered it. Like the volume has to be, unless you smoked like 20 minutes before the fight, you're 100% fine. So you can, in Vegas,
Nick Diaz, basically.
So poor Nick Diaz's career was completely submarined when now it's perfectly fine to smoke weed. So it's an interesting one. Actually, the next few fights as we hit these are all very interesting matchups. So we'll see what happens.
Nick Diaz fought the suspension 5 years and got it down to like 2 years, and then just never fought again.
Yeah. Poor Nick Diaz's career basically was absolutely thrown in the dumpster for weed, which is especially like now that it's legal.
High out of his mind when he beat Gomi.
I was gonna say when he, Go Plata, right?
You must have smoked right before you came out. I've never smoked weed in my life, I will say that, but that's a different conversation. Next fight.
Next up at UFC on ABC2, we have Nina Ansaroff versus Mackenzie Dern. This was one of the trickiest fights to pick on this card. At least for me, it was. Mackenzie Dern, world-class grappler, phenomenal grappler. I've been super hard on her in the past. First of all, her accent is one of the most ridiculous things you'll ever hear in your entire life. She's as American as you can be. A Brazilian father, but she's American, grew up in America, has a ridiculous Portuguese accent. With that being said, her grappling is phenomenal, but her first few UFC fights, she looked awful. Her takedowns were terrible, but her grappling was so good it didn't matter. But lately, her striking has looked good. She started to put it together. Like she's a genuine mixed martial artist now, and she looks really good, and she's improved really well. Nina Ansaroff has always been very good, a legitimate veteran, puts in the time, has had some wars with some really good people and won a lot of them. This is a tough fight. I'm going to go to you first, Dan. Nina is an American top team staple. She's been there forever. What are your thoughts as a fellow American top team stable?
Yeah, she's ATT, so I'm picking her. But yeah, I think she's going to win this fight. I think a lot of what you said about Dern is right. Her last fight against Jandiroba, her striking looked, much improved. A lot of power shots, looked more fluent with her movements. She does drop her hands a bit. So that's, you got to watch that because Nina's a good striker and she'll piece you up. Good body kicks, but, her takedowns, which really I think are the only path to winning this fight, I just don't think they're that good yet. She's working on them, but, I just don't think they're going to be what it takes to beat Nina. So, and then you look at Nina, so like she's got a deceptive record. So it's 10-6, but she's 4-1 since 2017. She trains at ATT, the best gym in the world. Her wife is Amanda Nunes, so she's got training on her mind 24/7. And her last loss was to the undefeated Tatiana Suarez. So when you look at the wrestling that Tatiana Suarez had in that fight compared to what Dern had, they're not even on close to the same level. Tatiana Suarez is leagues above her wrestling wise, in my opinion. And she got takedowns, but she worked very hard for them. Like going into that fight, Suarez was averaging almost 8 takedowns a fight. And Nina made her work to get every single one of them. She's just relentless. She was on her like glue. So for that to really be her only loss since 2017, I think that says a lot. She's coming off of having a baby, so there's always that as a factor. But if there's any gym that's going to get you prepared for a fight, it's ATT. So I think she's going to have enough takedown defense to keep it on the feet, and she should definitely win the striking. I think it'll be closer than people think, just because Dern has improved, but I think she's going to be better, more crisp. She's going to piece her up a little bit. And honestly, the more Dern shoots, I think that's in Nina's favor because I think she's going to get tired. I think no matter what, even if she gets takedowns, she's going to have to work very, very hard for them. And the more she does that, she's going to get pieced up on the feet. So I'm taking Nina. I think I'm going to put her in my DraftKings lineup at $8,300. Wish she was a little bit cheaper, but I think I am going to throw her in there.
I've gone back and forth. I really have just completely flip-flopped over and over again. I think the biggest thing that's thrown me off is Nina Ansaroff just had a baby, a couple months ago. I mean, that's not nothing. It really is not nothing. And Mackenzie Dern's loss is when she came back right after having a baby. So not that matters per se, but that is not nothing. All of us except poor Jacob have wives and children, and we know how ridiculously stressful and hard that is. I mean, just being in a house with a baby sucks, let alone just having one. So it is tricky. That I go back and forth nonstop. So Nick, what are your thoughts here? You've got 2 kids, one of which a little younger. What are your thoughts here? If immediately, a couple months later, it's like, all right, full training camp, let's get this done. Even though
Congrats on the kids.
You did try to do that, but your fight was canceled. What are your thoughts here? How do you see this going?
I am tired all the time because of my children, and I love them. And my wife definitely, like, with my business and fight career and stuff. So my wife carries the brunt of the weight with that. And right there, you have two fighters. They're both fighters, Amanda and Nina. So like, I don't know how the rule go with who does what. Amanda's pretty successful. She probably could get a pretty good babysitter, so she can focus on her fight camp. I think that Ansaroff is the more crisp striker with the better MMA technique, can mix it together well, showed good takedown defense, even though she got taken down by Tatiana Suarez. Tatiana was like an Olympic level female wrestler, like up there in the mix in terms of wrestling. And Mackenzie Dern is more like shoot a takedown, fall to guard and go for a submission type fighter. But she's got some hammers, man. Mackenzie Dern can hit hard. Like, a lot of people think that she's just a grappler, but she's got some serious power and she does not care. She will run forward and throw hooks. And like, sometimes that's hard to deal with when you're like a a good striker. I'm sure Ansaroff has a lot of good partners to train with that are more technical than anything. And then you fight with all these technical people, and then you have someone that's like kind of wild running at you, throwing things from different angles that you're not really used to seeing. And I think that might be something that's kind of keeping me away from putting Ansaroff in my lineup. I will pick her to win. I think Mackenzie Dern is very, very good fighter. But I don't think she has the takedown. And I think even off her back, Ansaroff is like smart enough to separate from guard or land ground and pound and get out when things get tricky.
Yeah, I mean,
Newell, that's a great point. Actually, you're scaring me. I mean, I'm going to stick with my pick, but you got me a little nervous because I'm having flashbacks now to fighting Jeff Nader the second time, where he throws those. He's a very good striker, but unorthodox, athletic hooks. And I was trying to throw straight technical stuff, and he was just catching me left and right. And I had to resort to wrestling for the first time in a while to win that fight. But yeah, when guys or girls are good at throwing those loopy, weird power shots, it's hard to get looks like that in the gym consistently, especially if you're fighting with good technical fighters all the time. So that's a good call out style wise.
yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. Jacob, what are your thoughts here? I know you and I have watched Mackenzie Dern fights together and have been equally frustrated at times. So what are your thoughts here? How do you see this going?
Yeah, I think her last fight, she proved just how tough she is. And she proved that she can be a striker if she needs to be that. You know, everyone knows her at this phenomenal grappler, but she proved that she can just tough out a decision win on her feet. You know, and you guys mentioned Nina's takedown defense. I have in my notes that she was kind of mauled by Suarez, but Suarez did struggle to get her down. She has very good takedown defense. She ended up getting her down, but at the same time, I think Mackenzie can get in there with wild stuff. And then, to me, she actually said, Mackenzie said that she's going to get a first round submission, and I believe her. And you know what else she said? She said, I'm proud to wear the lock of the week honors. That's what she said. Mackenzie Dern is the lock of the week. And I'll tell you why. This is why. Mackenzie Dern is the Francis Ngannou of the women's division when it comes to submissions. Francis Ngannou, it just takes what we saw. It only takes one. It only takes one. And it's only going to take Mackenzie to get her to the ground one time. And Nina's going to get submitted. So Mackenzie thinks it's going to be the first round. That must mean that she's very confident in her takedowns. She's been training, obviously. So I see her taking this fight. If it's not the first round submission, I think she finds a way to get to the ground. And then even if she doesn't, I think she's proved that she's good enough on the feet that she can be tough enough to win the fight. So Mackenzie Dern, lock of the week, baby.
I can't hate on you for that one. I love to just hate your picks. I can't hate on you for that one. I literally have had Mackenzie Dern in my lineup, Nina in my lineup, and I just keep swapping them back and forth every couple of hours, and I can afford both of them. So that pick, I literally just keep going back and forth. So we'll see what happens. It's not. I mean, first of all, she's plus 100. I don't even know if she qualifies for lock of the week.
I already put a big bet on her too. I already put a big bet on her because I think these odds are going to flip. Actually, they've already pushed a little bit more. I think she's plus 120 now, but I think the odds are going to flip by fight day.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. It's definitely an interesting matchup for sure. Next up at UFC on ABC2, we have Smiling Sam Alvey versus Julian Marquez. And this is another interesting fight. We've broken down Julian Marquez in the past. We've gotten that pick correct, but I don't know if we're all going to pick him this time. Dan, what are your thoughts? Are you going with Julian Marquez this time as well?
So the last time, if I remember correctly, we got that pick correct, but barely, right? That was like third round. I don't even know what, a minute left, and he pulled it off, and it was definitely a comeback. Who did he ask for a date with afterwards? Molly Cyrus.
Yeah, Miley Cyrus. Yeah. Did you just say Molly Cyrus? You're so old. Old.
What's her name?
She responded too. I think she.
Jacob, what'd you call her?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dan.
So what's her name? Actually, I don't even know.
Miley.
Oh.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Miley Cyrus.
Her name's Hannah.
Right, Miley Cyrus. All right. Anyways, yeah, no, Marquez was getting pieced up in that fight. I will say Maki Patola, I think, is an overall better striker than Sam Alvey, but we said it before. or I said it before.
Yeah,
Sam Alvey is deceptively good, and I feel like every fight he goes into, he's the underdog, and we saw it in his last fight against what's his name? I'm gonna butcher his name. So, anyways, his last fight, he looked really good boxing against a guy who was a much better technical boxer. So, I think Sam Alvey could make this fight interesting. The one thing I worry about is Julian Marquez has bombs, throws bombs. So I don't know. Alvey's so tough though. He doesn't get put away easy. So I think for the DraftKings dollars, Sam Alvey's worth the $7,200 in this one, especially with Marquez looking the way he looked last fight prior to pulling off that submission. So I don't have my lineup at this minute, but I am making some changes. So I may need to put him in there to get somebody more expensive. So, I'm picking Sam Alvey. I was so impressed with the way he fought his last fight. I'm taking him.
Yikes. Nick, what are your thoughts on this fight? I am not a big Sam Alvey fan. He's great. His personality's great. All that's great. His fighting style frustrates the hell out of me. But Nick, what are your thoughts here? How do you think this goes?
He comes out to that stupid ass Hey Soul Sister song, and he's smiling the whole time and kissing his wife, and I'm like, man, this is corny. And then they're like, oh, he has all these kids and he adopted all these kids, and I'm like, man, what a nice guy. I can't what a good guy. They're all a smile, hey, good mood. And then he just makes a mean face and backs up to the cage and throws cross hook cross. He just backs up and throws cross hook or hook cross, and that's it. It's the most basic thing, but he knows his range really well. He hits like a truck, and he's good even though everyone knows exactly what he's going to do. Julian Marquez is wow, it's hard and has a lot of heart. Not really much of a wrestler, but just a grinder, tough type of guy that finds ways to win. Against Hawes, who was a wrestler, he beat Matt Hamill, who's a wrestler, and he was getting out wrestled by Maki Pitolo, who's not a wrestler, and looked not too great until he won. He showed his heart and there, but he's got little, from someone with not a big reach, obviously, he's got small, short arms, and he's got to barrel in to get the takedown. And Sam Alvey has a really long reach and does that well. So I'm going to favor Sam Alvey in this fight. Even though I love Julian Marquez, he's someone I would say is a friend. So I'll be rooting for Marquez, but at 7,200, I think that Alvey should go in the lineup.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting matchup, and I agree with you. I think Marquez we were so high on him last time, and he just came out and didn't look great, and he pulled off the win, and he won by stoppage, but he just didn't look great leading into it. Jacob, I don't know why you're so up in arms right now. Can I what's your deal? What?
I actually, you know what? Thinking back now to the Gian Vellante fight, where Gian Vellante got clipped by Sam Alvey, but just kept coming forward, and it was a split decision. I am going to favor Julian Marquez, so I'm going to put him down.
Flip?
I was thinking, it just hit my head that I'm going to pick him as my favorite. But if you want the heavy people, the heavy thing, Sam Alvey is a good pick to put in your lineup, especially at 7,200, more so than Marquez. But I just had
that fight in 2018 just changed it all.
I was like, you know what? It just hit me. And I was like, I'm going to pick Marquez. But if I was going to put one in my lineup, I'll put Sam Alvey.
I'm not going to lie. I watched his last fight and I was so impressed. I was like, you know what? I think I'm picking him because I remember Marquez's last fight. And then I watched Alvey's against Un Jun. Sorry, I couldn't remember the name before. But I'm just pulling up his shirt dog. He lost 4 in a row before that. So he has not won in his last 5 fights. So
split decision to Ryan Spann, though. That's wild.
I know. Yeah, right. He fights tough in a lot of these fights. But Man, he looked, I don't know. If you haven't watched that fight yet, watch his last fight. He looked very tricky and good striking, and I thought he won all the boxing exchanges. I thought he won the fight, to be honest.
I just can't. Sam Alvey frustrates the hell out of me. Watching him fight is just so frustrating. It's almost as frustrating as watching Jacob do his stupid eye rolls and his stupid arm movements, to the point where people have to comment that you ruin the show in your blue hat. So go ahead, make whatever point you're going to make. Tell us about Julian Marquez's nickname. We'd love to hear all about it.
No, I'm saying I was going to ask for drug tests for Nick and Dan for going with Sam Alvey. Finally, Nick came to his senses, and then Dan started realizing this guy is winless in his last 5 fights. Winless. You guys are talking about how good he lost in a draw and talking about how bad Julian looked in a win. He won. He is 8-2. All 8 wins are finishes, no decisions. You know, and Sam Alvey he's winless in his last 5 fights. I don't know what you guys are seeing here. Julian Marquez runs over, knocks out Alvey very quickly. He's in my lineup.
The most sensible thing Jacob has said in weeks. This will be interesting. I don't think, interesting is the right word. I don't know if it'll be the most fun fight in the world, but it may be, because Sam Alvey actually brings it out of people, because he will, as Nick said, just put his back against the cage and throw bombs. And Julian Marquez is not a wrestler. I don't anticipate him shooting. So
he's
see what
cutting
happens
back down to 85 for this, right? Yeah, I think he's cutting back. He was at 205. Yeah.
He'll just do whatever. I mean, to his credit, UFC is like, you want to do this? He's like, yeah, all right, I'll fight that guy this weight. Sure, no problem. I'll take the opportunity. So good for Sam. He's been around. Considering he's not great, he's been around for a very long time, and he's built a legitimate career for himself. And regardless of our opinions of him,
he's got 50 fights.
He is. Yeah,
50,
exactly.
50 professional. He's 34 too. He's not that old.
No, but yeah, I think Julian Marquez is the pick. Hopefully he's shored up some cardio issues, but we'll see what happens. Next up at UFC on ABC2, we have Kyle Daukaus versus Aliaskhab Khizriev. In what a phenomenal picture you're able to get of him, Jacob. Really great job with this graphic as well. So this is a really interesting fight. I honestly don't know what the UFC wants to happen here. Usually in, the feature fight, the UFC has some sort of agenda. I don't know what the agenda is here. They want both guys. They're trying to build them both up. It's an interesting matchup this early, in both of their careers before their household names. This will be a fun one. Both great grapplers. Nick, what are your thoughts here? How do you see this one going?
This is the fight that I'm actually looking forward to the most on the card, probably. This and Jack Shore Hunter Azure fight. This one's tough, man. I think that, doing my research for this, I never really knew much about Aliaskhab Khizriev, but he is an absolute monster and maybe the most entertaining fighter that there is. He when he fought Paul Harris, he was just going buck wild to knock him out. His ground and pound is legit just ferocious and crazy good. And he hits hard and he comes forward and he fights. Daukaus, I believe, is going to be pretty significantly taller. Good, crisp boxing and probably the better jiu-jitsu game of the two. Aliaskhab kind of runs forward and throws hooks and does stuff like that. I'm a little worried about him getting caught coming up the middle, but I do think that he can overwhelm Daukaus and kind of get it on the ground, maybe not with like technical takedowns, but like striking, like throwing crazy and then like throwing him to the ground or sprawling on a shot and possibly finish the fight with ground and pound. So I'm going to favor him in this fight. He's my pick, but Daukaus, it wouldn't surprise me if Daukaus got his back and finished the fight. So I'm going to stay away from this, but I'm picking Khizriev.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. And Khizriev, his striking is underrated. He is fast. His striking is very fast, and he's got power, and he throws combinations together. So, like, his striking is really, really good. But Kyle Daukaus is huge. And in this matchup specifically, Khizriev's, I would say, smaller for the weight class. and Kyle Daukaus is bigger for the weight class. So there is a big difference there. So this is a really, really close matchup. I think Kyle Daukaus is more dangerous on the ground, but I think he will always be a step behind in the striking, and he'll end up taking some bad shots because he's a step behind in the striking. And I'm thinking Khizriev may be able to exploit that and get it done because his hands are too fast. He's got a little more power, and Kyle will take chances that he shouldn't be taking just to get it on the ground. Then he may get caught in a submission or end up on the wrong side of a takedown or something like that. But Dan, what are your thoughts here? How do you see this one going?
Yeah, I'm going with Khizriev. So I watched some tape on him. I mean, his last fight was on the Contender Series. He got a sub in the first round. He also beat Husamal Palhares in 2018, which, as everybody knows, that is like one of the scarier fights you can take, because you're like, all right, this guy's going to go and try to tear my ACL. Like, if I lose this fight, I'm going home with no ACL. But so he also trains at ATT. I've heard he's very tough, works hard, extremely well-rounded. I'm going with him in this fight all day. I always go with the ATT guys, but I think he's going to win this fight. I think he's going to be too much for Daukaus. Daukaus has been tough, but I just don't think he's got the level of experience and just overall fight knowledge and just training camps. I just think Khizriev is going to be on a different level in a lot of different areas. And I think he's going to win this fight. And Daukaus also, too, just looking at his one loss, it was to Brendan Allen. So Brendan Allen's good. He's tough, but he's I think Khizriev is just going to be on a different level everywhere and could make it a similar type of fight.
Oh.
So Khizriev is the pick.
Brendan Allen beat Kevin Holland.
Right. Brendan Allen beats a lot of guys.
He's good. But Daukaus' brother beat an ATT guy.
Here we go with the MMA math. So what does that equal?
It means nothing. I'm just trying to.
No, Brendan Allen's one of the. Dude, Brendan Allen is like.
Olenek, right? Olenek trains at ATT.
Yeah.
Yes.
Olenek,
I didn't know
he's like my favorite fighter. I just like that old strong mother flubber.
Yes.
But that's another thing. We're gonna be BSing too long if we start talking about. I was just trying to be it.
Brendan Allen is one of those guys where it's like, I don't know, not that I don't want to say I fight like Brendan Allen, but like he wins fights. Like, he's not the most, I don't want to say he's unathletic, but like I would win fights against guys that were better than me just off of pressure, grinding, pressure, scrambling, ending up on top and just making an ugly fight. I feel like Brendan Allen does a lot of that in some of his fights. But I think Khizriev is just going to be a better fighter everywhere and has the ability to do that. And it's just well-rounded. So yeah, I don't know. It'll be an interesting one. We shall see.
So Jacob, what are your thoughts on this fight? I actually didn't realize that this Daukaus was related to the heavyweight Daukaus.
Oh, I forgot one more thing before Jacob goes, because this could change his opinion. So Khizriev's nickname, Jacob, the Gray Wolf. I mean, if that's not I thought that was an awesome nickname. That's a very good nickname.
He's just disappointed he didn't get to say it, so he's gonna do that stupid face no matter what.
All right.
So Jacob, who is the Red Wolf because of the beard, what are your thoughts, Red Wolf? How do you see this fight going?
Yeah. So originally I was gonna pick Kyle Daukaus because I knew of Kyle Daukaus before. I knew how good a grappler he was. And then Khizriev, I started watching him, and he's just nastier, man. And Daukaus is a very, very good grappler, but he seems like a clean grappler to me. Where Khizriev, he's a phenomenal striker, and he mixed that with his grappling. And he's just one of those just nasty Russian, just get on top of you and just absolutely destroy you. So I think just with him being a little bit nastier, I think he wins this fight, and he actually made it into my lineup as well.
Yeah, it'll be. We'll see what happens. This will be an interesting one for sure. Like I said, I am just surprised the UFC is doing this matchup, only because I think both of these guys have awesome careers ahead of them. So I don't know why they'd throw them on this collision course before the whole world knew who either one of these guys were. Next up at UFC on ABC2, we have the co-main event of the evening. We have Sodiq Yusuff versus Arnold Allen in an exciting fight. A lot of these fights on this main card are very fun. They're very close. Arnold Allen is good everywhere. Yusuff is a great striker with a ton of power. it'll be interesting to see how this one goes. Dan, I'll let you go first. How do you see this fight going?
Yeah, I think this is going to be this is a tough fight to call. I'm definitely going to watch a lot more tape on these guys throughout the week. But right now, from what I'm seeing, I think the fight is going to be mostly a stand-up fight, and I think Sodiq Yusuff is just slightly more accurate, a little bit more powerful, and I think he's got the edge in the striking department, and I think that's what's going to be the deciding factor in this fight. So definitely check our final lineups or our final breakdowns, because man, it looks very close, but from what I'm seeing right now, I think Sodiq Yusuff is going to get an edge in the striking department and win the fight, either unanimous decision or catch him in like the second or third round with something clean.
Yeah, I think Sadiq's pressure will be a differentiator here. He's a heavy pressure fighter. He marches forward. His last win against Andre Fili was awesome. We got to see him wrestling. We got to see him in some bad positions. Andre Fili is phenomenal. So we saw Sodiq in bad positions. We saw what he could do with good positions, and we see that pressure. So I think he wins as well. But it's definitely a fun one. So Nick, what are your thoughts here? And who do you think wins this fight?
I'm also going to go with Sodiq in this fight. I think he's little, he's compact. Arnold Allen is tall. It might be harder for him to get the takedowns. Arnold Allen comes forward like a madman and throws high volume and is very entertaining. And just has a lot of heart. He was losing that fight to Mads Burnell and then choked him out in the third round. I just think Sodiq Yusuff has good footwork, good in and out, good power, and is just going to be hard for Allen to get a hold of. And he's going to win this fight. I don't have him in my lineup because Arnold Allen is 7-0 in the UFC and has looked absolutely amazing. So he always finds a way to win. So it's like, I'm not going to go against a guy that's that good at figuring out ways to win. But like, if I had a bet, I would bet on Sodiq Yusuff.
That's a good point. Some guys just figure out ways to win, right? Like you're like, I mean, I think that's a quiet 7-0. When I was looking, I was like, geez, this guy's 7-0 in the UFC.
Yeah, I mean, 7 in a row is usually title talk in any division. So you're right that the quiet is a great way to phase that. Especially featherweight's a tough division, but they've all beaten each other at the top there. So it is easy for somebody 7-0 to sort of leapfrog, and we haven't heard that yet. But Jacob, what are your thoughts here? How do you see this one going?
Yeah, 16-1 for $7,700. You won't see that very often at all. And he's a fantastic striker. I think Sodiq is the better striker. And I think the difference here, I'm going to go with Arnold Allen. And I think he finds a way to use his grappling. I think he has to find a way to use his grappling to win the fight. And I think he finds a way. You saw Sodiq getting taken down by Fili. He got back up, and it wasn't too big a deal in the fight. But I think Arnold is skilled enough as an MMA, mixed martial artist altogether to realize, I think that I might not have the edge here. Let me just shoot takedowns. And even if he uses that just to pressure and take the striking out of Sodiq, I think that's his only path to victory. And as a 16-1 fighter, like you guys say, he gets the job done when he needs to. So I think he knows that's his only path. And I think that's what he does. And I think he wins the fight.
Yeah, another great matchup on this card. I just wish this card wasn't in the middle of the day. That sucks. But either way, there's another really good matchup.
That's a good $7,700 value too, right there, Jacob. That's a good call out.
Yeah, for sure. Next up at UFC on ABC2, we have the main event between Marvin, Vettori, and Kevin Holland. As you know, Kevin Holland is replacing Darren Till, which kind of sucks because, as Jacob informed me, the only reason this card is on in the middle of the day is because of Darren Till and his fan base. And now Darren Till's off the card, and we're stuck with the UFC at 3:00 in the afternoon. With that being said, I actually think this is a much more interesting matchup than these odds will tell you. And Kevin Holland looked like absolute garbage just a few weeks ago. But the fact that he took this fight and is having a quick turnaround like this almost tells me that he understands I needed to do more. I needed to move forward. I needed to shut up in that fight. And he just wants to get back in here, prove us all wrong, and get back on that winning streak that he had in 2020. Nick, I'll let you go here. How do you see this going? I mean, do you think these odds are right that Kevin Holland really should be this big of an underdog? Or do you think Kevin Holland had a bad night, and he's very excited to show us differently.
I mean, Kevin Holland dropped Derek Brunson. He kind of goofed off a little bit, but maybe he learned his lesson, or maybe he's just gonna stick to his chops and say, I'll never stop talking and just be this goofball forever, which could cost him a lot of fights. He had his heart set on moving down to welterweight, which kind of tells me he's like, whatever, I don't care if I even lose at middleweight, like I'm a welterweight now. And that's probably not true, but it's something that's crossed my mind as maybe true. And then you have Vettori, who split decision to Adesanya. Great fighter. Used his grappling, I believe his last fight to get or 2 fights ago to get the submission. Looked great versus Jack Hermanson in a very tough fight, and should be the favorite to win. 6,600 is wild for Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland is a great fighter that's knocked out some good people and had amazing striking in the UFC. I think this is going to be a pretty close fight. Honestly, I think that it's going to go all 5 rounds and have a lot of stand-up action. But I think Vettori will just be like one step ahead with the combinations and mixing in the takedowns as well. And I'm picking Vettori for this fight, and I'm putting in my lineup.
Yeah, I think you saying it's going all 5 rounds is 100% true. I think, Vettori split decision to Adesanya. That holds up well, right? Adesanya is the champ of that division and has beat pretty much everybody in it. But, Kevin Holland, although he didn't look great against Derek Brunson, he didn't get stopped. He didn't seem close to getting stopped. He just seemed like he couldn't handle the wrestling and wasn't too excited to do much more. I will say I did watch his interview with Ariel Helwani, and he basically was like, hey, the UFC asked me to take this fight, so I took it. I was hoping for a little more of, I needed to get back in there. I needed to get that win. And to your point, Nick, if he's already decided I'm going down the welterweight, UFC needs a favor, I'll do him a favor. The headspace may be a little off there, just sort of, he sees it as a favor and a payday, and less of, let me get that back right now and erase what just happened. I do have Kevin Holland in my lineup. I may change that. I'm not positive he's going to win, but Jacob had an interesting stat last time we broke down Kevin Holland, and it was, what was it? He's the most accurate striker in the history of the middleweight division.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right, sir.
Which is absurd, because think about the people who have ruled that division for years. So anyway,
that's such a flawed stat, by the way. So the last fight where he got taken down hell on his back,
he threw six strikes and they all landed. 100%.
He was 4 for 6. That accuracy.
Hey, Dan, do you know how many strikes he had in that fight, Dan?
I don't know, Jacob. We were making an analogy that your stat is stupid.
190.
Okay.
So you're saying that he doesn't throw a strike? That's the stat is slanted because he doesn't throw strikes. He threw 190 strikes.
I'm just saying, in percentages doesn't mean it. You're comparing him against the rest of the division, against the guys who have beaten and won and outstruck high-level opponents. I'm not saying he's not
Silva.
Right. Like, he's a very good striker, but just when you use percentages, it skews the stats. Like, would you say he's okay, so
he's
the stats,
top 10. He's a top 10 striker in the UFC right now.
Okay, maybe. I don't know. I don't
talent-wise.
No, I don't agree.
Not a
with
pure
that.
striker. As talent-wise, he is.
Now we're getting into all the variables. But no. So would you say that, take the stats aside, would you say that he, looking at him and his fight career, he's definitely the most accurate striker in the middleweight division?
No.
Thank you.
So Dan, you just finished your rant. I'll let you go ahead and make your pick.
Well, I couldn't let that go. All right. So, Holland, if you can't tell, listen, I think he's a great striker. He's obviously a very, very good striker, but I just think the run he had in 2020 showed that, but I'm not sold on him as a complete fighter yet. We said it last time, we picked against him. We were right. Wrestling and ground has been a problem for him, and he has that attitude. Like, he kind of doesn't really care. He's like, I'm going to go out there and do what I'm going to do. And I hear people always make, he was goofing off and he talks too much. It's like, how about he didn't learn how to wrestle, defend takedowns, or stand up? Like, the fights he's won, even some of the fights he's won, like, he got taken down by Jacare twice, before he landed that crazy weird hook from the bottom. His other losses, Brendan Allen taken down, Derek Brunson taken down. So it's been a problem for a long time in his career. Just on that crazy run in 2020, he got some favorable matchups where he won split decisions or starched the guy early. So I'm not going to say it's luck, but I'm not sold on him as a complete fighter yet. And just watching Vettori, on the other hand, he is a complete fighter. He is a very good striker. He's a good wrestler. He scrambles. And I'll say the difference between him and Brunson is if Vettori's smart, first of all, I think he should just be going for takedowns right out of the gates. He's good enough to strike and stand with Holland. I don't know that he'll win a striking match against him, but he's good. Holland could catch him if they, struck for 5 rounds. But if he just goes out and shoots takedowns, even if he doesn't get it, he's going to scramble and end up on top. He's been in bad positions against other guys, and he always scrambles. He hits switches. He finds a way to end up on top. And then from there, he smashes guys and he finishes. So I think that's the big difference. Vettori, I think, has the wrestling to do it and the finishing power or the finishing abilities to put him away. So I will say, though, Angelo, I do agree with kind of the intangibles of that short notice. Don't give a crap. I got nothing to lose. Let me go out there and wing it. Sometimes that works in your favor. So it has me a little bit scared. But after watching tape, after Holland's last fight, there's no way I can not pick Vettori. From a DraftKings standpoint, it's tough because he's so expensive.
Yeah, $9,600 is a fortune. That's like a fifth of your budget.
Right. But I can't, I feel like I'm like stuck right now. I'm like, I can't not put somebody in the main event. It's a 5-round fight.
That's how I ended up with Holland. I don't think Holland wins the fight, but I can't not have somebody in the main event. And Vettori is like, that's a fifth of my entire budget.
How many points? Does anybody remember how many points Holland got last event? I can actually
53. That was going to be my point. You just stole my thunder.
53
is
okay.
Not terrible, and that was a one-sided beating.
That's what that was. I mean, that's what I'll transition straight to my point, because I think at $6,600, that's the best value you will ever see for a person like Kevin Holland. You guys say that he was dominated by Brunson, but he still scored that 53 points, and he had Brunson hurt and could have finished. I think he could have finished that fight if he jumped on him, because he had him hurt, and that 53 points isn't credited for. It wasn't really a knockdown, but he was hurt enough that it could have been a knockdown easy. So I had another 10 points at $6,600. Kevin Holland's the best value you'll ever see in DraftKings. He doesn't get finished often, and he's got the striking. I think Brunson did very good jobs of not caring about the noise and didn't get baited into whatever. I think Marvin is a guy that could get baited into striking. I think that if he uses grappling, he can definitely win the fight, but I think he can get baited into a striking match here, and I think Kevin Holland wins that. So I think Kevin Holland actually wins the fight. I have money on Kevin Holland, and he's in my DraftKings lineup.
Jacob, you need to take a breath of fresh air right now.
Dan, he just bullied you.
You came out, your beard was turning more red as you were talking. You were so angry when you started that.
Dan, I lost a little respect for you, man. Jacob just came in here with those skinny legs and just straight up bullied you out of your pick. He's like, I'm up now.
Bullied me out of definitely didn't bully me out of my pick. My pick is still my pick, but I will say when the beard started turning like fluorescent orange, I did get a little nervous. I thought it was like a Pokemon move or something. He's going to start doing something. But no, Jacob, I do understand your point, but Vettori should win the fight. That's my point. The big difference between those two, the 53 points he got last fight, because that is a fair call out, right? He lost the fight. He got 53 points. He's only $6,600 this week. I think Vettori has more finishing ability.
Yeah, Vettori is definitely better than Brunson. He's definitely.
I don't even know. I mean, dude, styles are a little bit different, but from a finishing standpoint, dude, he could take Holland down in the second round, and instead of riding around, grinding on him, he'll choke him out, get his back, and submit him. And there goes the 53 points. So I don't disagree that it's a good value, but I just worry that Vettori could finish the fight earlier than Brunson did. Could have.
Either way, it'll definitely be, I think it'll be a fun fight. I think it will go, as Nick said, the full 5 rounds. And anytime you have somebody like a Kevin Holland with that striking ability, for a full 5 rounds. Anything can happen. And I think it's actually a decent main event, even though we had some changeups here. So I'm looking forward to it. Before you go, check out the description below. In there, we have links to our Facebook, our Twitter, our Instagram, and more importantly, to our DraftKings League. Check out the league, join the league, participate in the contests, and as we get going and as you start winning, we're going to start handing out gift cards and participating and doing things like that. So check those out. Every week, there are drops on every fight card. So make sure you check out this channel and our social media on Saturday before the fights start so that you have our most updated lineups and picks.